Imagine stepping back, way back, into an ancient Buddhist monastery. You're probably picturing, peace, quiet contemplation.
Serenity, right. That's the image.
Exactly. But today, we're diving into a story that, it kind of shakes that up. It's a pretty scandalous incident, actually.
It really is. An incident that rocked the community and led to one of the most explicit rules you'll find in the early monastic code.
And this rule deals with some very specific, frankly, quite graphic regulations about how monks should speak to and interact with women.
We're going deep into the Saṃghādisesa rules today, specifically rule number 3. It's fascinating stuff.
And the thing is, right, this isn't just hearsay or some later commentary.
No, our source is the Vinaya Pitaka itself, the actual disciplinary code.
Think of it like the foundational legal text for these ancient monks. It's incredibly detailed.
Meticulous, really. It doesn't just give the rule, it records the story behind it, the circumstances, the reasons why it was needed.
So our mission today isn't just to read the rule. We want to get into the why. Why was it set up like this? Why so much detail?
And what does it tell us about the real boots-on-the-ground challenges of keeping a spiritual community on track? It's all about managing complex human interactions.
Yeah, codifying ethics around something as tricky as speech. It's a really interesting look at how communities work.
It really is. A profound look, actually.
Okay, let's get into that origin story then. Where does it start?
We're transported back to ancient Savatthi, to Jetavana Monastery, Anathapitika's park, a place the Buddha often stayed.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And who's our main character here?
That would be Venerable Udāyi, a monk living there, apparently in a really nice forest dwelling. The text calls it beautiful, pleasing, and inspiring.
Sounds lovely. Almost too nice, perhaps.
Well, maybe that was part of it, because a group of women came to the monastery specifically asking to see Udāyi's dwelling. They'd heard about it.
Okay, seems innocent enough so far. Curiosity.
Initially, yes. Udāyi started showing them around, which, seems reasonable.
But then, this is where it goes off the rails.
It really does.
Yeah.
After the tour, the text says Udāyi started using, really inappropriate language. Coarse speech.
And the text is specific.
Shockingly specific. It says he made remarks directly referencing their anus and urethra. The Pali terms are vācā and pasavamagga.
Wow. Okay, so not subtle hints.
Not at all. He would apparently praise these areas or criticize them, beg women, implore them, ask questions, answer questions, instruct, advise, even curse them using terms related to these parts.
That's quite a list, and very graphic. How did the women react?
It was mixed, which is also interesting. Some women, the text describes them as shameless, dissolute, and immodest, actually engaged with him.
They joked back.
Yeah, they joked, talked, bantered, even mocked him. But others, described as modest, were deeply offended.
Understandably.
They left and complained to the other monks. Their complaint was powerful. We wouldn't even want our husbands to talk to us like this, let alone Venerable Udāyi.
That really puts it in perspective. So word got back.
Oh, yes. It reached the Buddha himself. He called Udāyi in and questioned him.
Did Udāyi deny it?
Nope. He admitted it. Straight up.
And the Buddha's response?
Swift and severe condemnation. He called Udāyi a foolish man and said his actions were unsuitable, improper, unseemly, not befitting a monk, unlawful, and not to be done. Just a whole string of negatives.
He didn't mince words.
Not at all. And crucially, he explained why. He reminded Udāyi that the Dharma, his teaching, was taught for dispassion, not for fueling passion, for calming sensual desires, not stirring them up.
So Udāyi's behavior was fundamentally undermining the whole point of the monastic life.
Precisely. It wasn't just bad manners. It was counterproductive to the spiritual goal. And that's why it couldn't just be a telling off. It needed a formal rule.
Which became Saṃghādisesa Rule 3.
Exactly. That incident is the direct origin.
So what does the rule actually say? Let's hear the wording.
The core prohibition is, if a monk, captivated with a distorted mind, speaks coarse words to a human female as a young man speaks to a young woman with sexual connotation, it is a Saṃghādisesa offense.
Okay, captivated with a distorted mind. That sounds like it needs unpacking.
It does, and the text helps us. Captivated, otinsa, isn't just mild interest. It means being attached, desirous, or with mind bound. Basically, seriously infatuated. Let's call it infatuated intent for clarity.
All right, so the internal state is key. It's not accidental. What about distorted mind?
Now, this could mean angry or deluded in other contexts, but here, the commentary is clear. It means a mind tinged with passion.
So again, reinforcing that it's about speech driven by sexual desire.
Absolutely. The motive matters.
And it specifies human female.
Yes, matogo. The rule explicitly excludes non-human beings like yakis or pidis or animals, and crucially, the woman has to be intelligent enough to understand the difference between polite and coarse speech.
So her understanding matters too. Interesting.
It does. She needs to be able to discern well-spoken from ill-spoken.
Okay, and the big one, coarse speech, duṭṭhullā vācā. How is that defined?
Very, very precisely. It's defined as speech connected with the anus, urethra, or sexual intercourse. So vācā, pasovamaga, or mithunahama. No ambiguity there.
Wow. Crystal clear. And remind us, what's the consequence of a Saṃghādisesa offense? How serious is it?
It's very serious within the monastic framework. It's not something dealt with lightly. It requires a formal meeting of the Saṃgha, the whole community, for the monk's rehabilitation process. It's a major breach.
Okay, so they define coarse speech as relating to those specific areas or acts. Did they give examples of how someone might speak coarsely?
Oh, did they ever? The text goes into incredible detail, listing specific forms this coarse speech could take. It's almost like they anticipated every loophole.
Really? Like what?
Well, for instance, praising or criticizing those two paths, the anal and urethral passages, commenting on them in a positive or negative way, or begging or imploring. This could be directly asking for sex, like, give it to me, or you really ought to give it to me.
That's direct.
That direct. Or setting up conditions like asking, when will your mother be pleased? When can I have sex with you? Essentially transactional language.
This is astonishingly explicit for an ancient religious text.
It is. It shows how seriously they took clamping down on this behavior. It also included questioning or counter-questioning.
Asking about her private life.
Exactly. Things like, how do you, do it with your husband? Or how about with a paramour? Asking for intimate detail.
And instructing or advising, like unsolicited sex advice.
Precisely that. Saying things like, you should do it like this. If you do it like this, your husband will find you more pleasing.
Unbelievable. And you mentioned cursing, too.
Yes, using really offensive sexually charged insults. Calling a woman ill-omened, constantly bloody, hermaphrodite, sexually indiscriminate, or having both sexual characteristics.
This deeply offensive stuff.
Absolutely. These examples leave absolutely no wiggle room. They wanted everyone to understand exactly what crossed the line into prohibited speech, driven by that infatuated intent. It's all about upholding celibacy and basic respect.
Okay, so the definition is incredibly thorough. But you mentioned earlier that not all offenses were treated the same. There were levels.
That's right. It wasn't just one category. The Vinaya has this really interesting graduated system for offenses based on the directness of the speech and which part of the body was being referred to.
So it's nuanced. It's not just, you said something bad, here's the punishment.
Exactly. It shows a sophisticated understanding of transgression. So the top level, the most severe, is Saṃghādisa.
That's the one we've been discussing, triggered by Udāyi's actions.
Right. And that applies when an infatuated monk speaks coarsely, specifically about a woman's private parts, the vācā or pasavamaga.
The anus or urethra.
Correct. And interestingly, they note compounding effects. Speak that way to two women. That's two Saṃghādisesa offenses. Speak to a woman and say a eunuch in those terms. That's one Saṃghādisesa and one lesser offense, a dukkaṭa.
Okay, so it multiplies. What's the next level down?
That's thullaccaya. Still considered a grave offense, but less severe than Saṃghādisesa.
And what triggers a thullaccaya?
This happens when an infatuated monk speaks coarsely, but about parts of the body below the armpits but above the knees. So kind of the torso and upper legs, excluding the most private areas.
Still inappropriate, but referencing slightly less sensitive areas reduces the severity level.
Exactly. And again, the compounding rule applies if multiple people are addressed.
And the lowest level?
That's dukkaṭa, often translated as a minor offense or wrongdoing.
When does that apply?
This is for coarse speech from an infatuated monk about parts of the body above the armpits, like the face, neck, arms, or below the knees, feet, ankles, etc.
So the extremities.
Right. Or, interestingly, it can even apply if they speak coarsely about any body part, if the intent is rooted in that infatuation, even if it doesn't quite meet the criteria for the higher offenses.
So the intent is always hovering there as a factor, even for the minor offense.
Always. This whole system really highlights that they looked at two things: the monk's internal state, that infatuation, and the specific nature and target of the words. It's quite a framework.
It really is. And this nuance becomes even clearer when you look at the specific case studies they recorded, right? where
Yep.
intent and understanding really played out.
Oh, absolutely. Those cases are fascinating. They show a legal system grappling with ambiguity and interpretation in a really sophisticated way for the time.
Give us some examples. What kind of situations led to, say, just a dukkaṭa, the minor offense?
Okay, so there are cases involving misinterpretation. Imagine an infatuated monk sees a woman with a blanket. Maybe it's red or coarse-haired or long-haired. He makes a comment about her red one or coarse one or long one.
Okay. Potentially suggestive.
Right, he intends it suggestively, but if the woman just takes it literally, like, oh yes, this old blanket, then she hasn't understood the sexual connotation.
So because you didn't get the innuendo.
The monk gets a dukkaya for his inappropriate intent, but it's not a Saṃghādisesa because the explicitly coarse meaning wasn't conveyed or understood.
That makes sense. What else?
There's one about a woman coming back from planting a field. An infatuated monk says to her, "Yours is sown."
Okay. Double meaning there. Sown field or implying pregnancy.
Exactly. But if she replies, "Yes, sir, but it hasn't been reaped yet," showing she understood it literally about the field.
Then again, it's just a dukkaya. The monk had the suggestive thought, but it didn't land as intended.
Precisely. Same idea if a monk offers to help a woman working, saying something like, "Stop, sister, I'll do it," or even, "Lie down, sister, I'll do it," if she doesn't pick up on the possible double meaning related to sex.
Dukkaya, again, it's all about whether the sexual connotation connects.
Right. Now, for a thullaccaya, the suggestion might be a bit clearer, but still indirect.
Like what?
There is a case where an infatuated monk asks a female wanderer, "Sister, is the path sinking?"
Sinking. What's the implication there?
Well, possibly sinking into sexual relations. It's subtle. If she replies, maybe playing along or maybe misunderstanding slightly, "Yes, monk, are you going to follow?" That interaction, that subtle, suggestive question from him leads to a thullaccaya.
Okay, so a step up, because the suggestion was perhaps a bit more pointed, even if indirect.
Exactly. But for the full Saṃghādisa, the solicitation has to be pretty clear.
Give us an example of that.
Okay, an infatuated monk approaches a woman known to be devout, faithful. He says, "You're faithful, sister, but that thing you give to your husband, you don't give that to us monks."
Okay, definitely leading.
She asks, "What thing, sir?" And he clarifies, "Sexual intercourse."
Right. No ambiguity there.
None. That's a clear Saṃghādisa. Or another version. He says, "The best gift. You don't give the best gift to us." She asks what that is, and again he clarifies, "Sexual intercourse."
Saṃghādisesa again. Direct solicitation, rooted in infatuation, referring explicitly to the prohibited act.
That's the key combination. These cases really hammer home that the offense level depends on the monk's infatuated state and how direct and clear the sexual meaning is to the woman receiving it.
It's a fascinating interplay between internal state, external words, and the recipient's perception.
It really is quite sophisticated.
Now, were there any exceptions? Situations where even saying something related to these topics wouldn't be an offense?
Yes, the Vinaya is very practical about that too. It lists specific circumstances where no offense is incurred.
Such as?
Well, if the speech is for a legitimate purpose at the purakarasa, like, say, a medical examination or inquiry, obviously that might involve sensitive topics, but the intent isn't infatuation.
Makes sense. What else?
If it's for the sake of the Dhamma purakarasa, maybe explaining a teaching that touches on the body or relationships, but again, the purpose is instructional, not sensual.
Or giving guidance.
Exactly. For the sake of instruction or admonition, anusasana purakarasa. Giving necessary spiritual advice, even if it involves sensitive subjects, is exempt if the intent is pure.
And presumably if the monk wasn't mentally sound.
Correct. Insanity, madakasa, is listed as an exemption.
And there's one more really interesting one, isn't there? About the first guy.
Ah, yes. The Kamika, the original perpetrator. Venerable Udāyi himself.
He was exempt.
From the penalty of this specific rule, yes. Because the rule was established as a result of his actions, it's a common principle in the Vinaya. The person whose transgression causes the rule to be made isn't usually penalized by that very first instance of the rule.
It's like you can't be punished by a law that didn't exist when you did the act. Case law in action.
Precisely. It shows this very reactive, practical way the rules evolved. A problem arises, the community addresses it, a rule is formed. It wasn't all thought out abstractly beforehand.
So that brings us through the whole arc of Saṃghādisa III, from Udāyi's shocking behavior
to the detailed definition of coarse speech.
The different levels of offense based on body parts and intent.
The case studies showing how interpretation mattered.
And finally, the practical exceptions. It's quite a journey through ancient monastic law.
It really is. And looking at the bigger picture, this one rule tells you so much about the intense effort involved in maintaining discipline and ethical standards in that community.
They were really grappling with human nature, weren't they? Trying to build guardrails for the spiritual path.
Absolutely. Guardrails against very human impulses and failings. It reminds us that these high ideals like celibacy and dispassion require constant vigilance and clear boundaries.
And, what really strikes me is how relevant these concerns feel even today, outside of a monastery. Thinking about intent, the impact of our words, setting clear boundaries.
Exactly. The need for clarity, even uncomfortable clarity sometimes, about what's acceptable and what isn't in speech and conduct that's universal in any community, isn't it?
It really is. This ancient text feels surprisingly modern in its focus on the power and responsibility of language.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to ponder. Considering how incredibly minutely these ancient monks defined inappropriate speech, down to specific body parts and perceived intent, what does that detailed focus tell us about the perceived power of words? And maybe about the responsibility that comes with wielding them in any community back then and perhaps especially now.